Welcome, everybody. We're after a long holiday break. Aaron and I are back. We're jumping back in at Chapter 7 of the Screwtape Letters by C.S. Lewis. And we've had a fun journey so far, and we'll continue on. And here, Aaron. And we'll go ahead and jump in. I was just reviewing Chapter 7 since it's been a little while. And it is an interesting one. He digs in. It looks like it's more along the lines of balancing the act of belief and disbelief in Satan and the demons. Um, and the first note that I came across um, was around the first chapter paragraph, and the statement, the full sentence here is, "I have great hopes that we shall learn in due time how to emotionalize and mythologize their science to such an extreme that what is in effect a belief in us, though not under the name, will creep in while human mind remains close to belief in the enemy." And the note I wrote to myself about that was, you can see that effectively happening in today's culture where uh, uh, you see a lot of rising interest in Wicca, as an example, or Scientology, or of course, we see in our scientists that are very non godly. That all they say is, if it's not, well, Stephen Hawking, for example, I know he's passed recently, but he's an example of, he believed more in the science than he did in God. Um, and it's interesting. So the idea of Wicca, from my notes here, is that you have these very earthly rituals. Everybody believes, oh, this is this is Earth. This is nothing of God. This is the sun, Earth, and yet they fail to recognize how that Satan reigns the Earth. That's what, God sent him from heaven to Earth to control that as part of that fall of during that original sin. So I thought that was interesting how how C.S. Lewis recognized in this that it we that the devil can get us to start to replace our belief in God with a belief in our sciences and our earthly rituals, yet, as you said, yet it still feel like we believe in God. So I don't know. What is your thoughts on that, Aaron?
Yeah, I think I like what you just said about it, and the note I had was that it's really a spiritual naivety that goes around, that's going around, and I think we all see it as there's this general notion that yes, maybe even to the point that evil exists, but it's this force, it's this watered down force, without really, I mean, studying the scripture and understanding that there are actually spirits, spiritual beings that are at work all the time, really discrete, um, real existence, right? That with jobs and tasks and missions and everything else, just as real as you and I. There's general, and I. So when it comes to Christianity, I think Christians can fall into that too. Is yeah, evil exists, but well, I don't see it, so it's just this general force out there, and that's kind of dangerous. So
Yeah. Yeah, I think yoga falls into that category of this idea of the body's forces, or the body's ability to do its thing, yet not acknowledging that there's a spiritual battle tied to the use of yoga, and not necessarily in the physical stretching portion, but it's in the spiritual side of the yoga, study of yoga, that people are, just passing off as not really a spirit driven battle, uh, or anything else that's, or the feel good, the feel good attitudes, or and things like that, or just even using the drug use that we get into. It's the use of drugs to get past our problems, and not recognizing the spiritual aspect of it all.
yeah.
So,
So I found it interesting how C.S. Lewis. The other note I made was talks about comic book figures. Kind of how people look at evil beings because they're all through comic books. So I think that kind of is how most people probably think about evil. So
Yeah, yeah, the classic devil with pitchfork and tail, and I like how you described this. If we can get them to really focus on the disbelief in the comic character, then it can be conveyed into disbelief of the real thing. Um, and you're right. I mean, yeah. So that's one of the surveys I remember hearing about is that people believe in, so discounting those that don't believe in anything, there is a growing number of people who believe in God and heaven but don't believe in devil and hell. And
mhm.
so it's kind of like when you think about the definition of what God and heaven mean in context, there is it's the good. So the opposite of that is what Satan and hell represent. But it's hard philosophically to reason through all that. But C.S. Lewis talks about the need to accept extremes, and I thought about that, and a new thought just came to me tonight about it. All extremes except extreme devotion to the enemy, quote unquote, God in the story here as we portray him. Remember, the enemy is the demons, my version of name for God, for obvious reasons. Um, so devotion to the enemy are to be encouraged, and yeah, the idea I think C.S. Lewis kind of going around the materialistic, you know, and one example I thought about recently, just as recent as last night, is how many people focused on the Super Bowl last night. I mean, how many millions of people around the country, despite the fact that who was playing, you still had millions of people, on this one event, almost as if it were a worshipful event. It's almost like they idolized what the event was, the sport, and that's kind of it's an extreme devotion to, and to one thing, and to some it goes above and beyond their devotion to God, and I think that's where the devil wants us to be, is devoting all of our attention to one thing other than God.
Yeah, so I kind of noted that extreme mindsets are kind of ripe for evil. Kind of a playground for evil, I think, one extreme or the other, whether it be something like you were just talking about is idolatry, essentially, by definition, um, or whether it's an extreme mindset. The last chapter we talked about was pacifism versus patriotism. You talked about there, and that's, I think politically we see the extreme left, extreme right now, and I think the general population understands that that's not really a good thing. So
Right.
extreme mindsets, very ripe territory for evil.
Yeah, and he goes on to talk about uh, let's see, what was it? The trying to get the context here right. Um, so he talks about that distance between like our political arena now, picking one idea or the other, and then the idea is that he's talking about is you follow a certain cause to a point where the idea of it becomes impersonal, and a lot of that today is what a lot of our challenges have become. We've become impersonal, and I might have made a note that you think about our social media, which was intended to bring more contact between us, has brought nothing but divisiveness, and that's more impersonal contact. And you know, I know, and all throughout history, there's a obviously this is from the 1950s. C.S. Lewis is talking about this impersonal vendetta from what causes bring about. But I think with our connectedness through media, through the internet, through the ability to always be connected via the internet, we it's easier for these impersonal causes to grow. It's easier for people just to get rallied behind a cause without having any personal sacrifice in it, so that they can they can rail out on people. Take for example the recent case of well, just about anybody on out there who gets on a viral video. All of a sudden, people are on a cause either for or against that person to an extreme where it's no longer about the person; it's about what that event represented. But that person's caught up in it. It becomes impersonal to everybody. It's easy to stand back and just rail on people without having a personal connection. And it seems like it's even easier today than it ever was.
Yeah, sure. So my notes, I read through all that. I'm glad you brought out that point because I'd kind of glossed over that, and the whole middle kind of expands on that that thought. I kind of went a little beyond that and talked about the comment in the next paragraph about patriotism, pacifism. So I already mentioned that. But then towards the end of it's really towards the end of the chapter. The last note I have is just talking about religion or religious activity. I summarize it versus true religion. So doing things for policies, movements, causes, crusades. The extreme um, religion really versus true religion being prayer and charity, giving. The things that the church is supposed to do. So um, that's kind of how I rounded the chapter out with my notes.
Yeah, yeah, that's a valid point. I mean, um, had well, my wife and I were talking the other day. We were watching, seeing it. Um, talking about how Christianity is built on relationships, not somebody standing on a corner with a sign, touting off in scripture. And while they can have some effectiveness, I'm not saying that they are wrong for doing so. But ultimately, if you look at any of our journeys, especially in myself being, um, saved not many years back, um, the journey is not what saved me was not somebody standing in the corner spouting off of scripture. I had I don't know if you remember the preacher who hung out at UNCC a lot and would just come about once a month and I don't know if you ever made it through the courtyards and
Yes, I
yeah
remember the
yeah
what do they call that tower thing? What was that called?
yeah
The
yeah.
funny phone. I forget what they called it.
Well, it's not there anymore. That tower's gone. They tore that down, but
Oh, did
uh,
they? Okay.
yeah, at least but yeah, there was a little platform, and you'd be up on there,
Yes.
and in his case, he just taught scripture, and he'd criticize and judge the students as they went by. He'd say, "Oh, you're going to hell," and everything, and that did nothing. All it did was made me laugh. It was just as a non-Christian, godless person at the time, all I did was just I laughed at him. Just I rolled my eyes because it failed the one thing which finally got to me is when people made reached out to me with relationships, tried to
Sure.
become my friend and connect with me, and while there was no overnight change, it was a 10-year journey of people making connections and people at work praying for me, one you and I know personally there at work, um, and just that growth in that period. Then eventually, when my wife came around, everything the seeds were ready to be harvested. So, that were planted. So it was relationships all the time, and so yeah, getting into an extreme case, as many people are even now or today are doing. We're rallying about you hear, a very good example of impersonal and not judging the causes and not judging that there's some benefit to them. That I'm not saying they should stop, but I'm just saying that it's easy to get impersonal. Is like we have a hurricane somewhere in the world. All of a sudden, it's text 10 cents or text $1 to this cause, and we'll send money to fix that problem. And okay, yeah, I did my duty. I've done my thing, but there's no personal connection there. It's just I texted something to a random number. I gave a little money, and then it's out of my mind. I'm done. I've checked it off. I'm good, right? But ultimately, we personally have not done anything of lasting value there. There's no personal relationship built up that makes a lasting change in a person's life. So I think the biggest danger, as C.S. Lewis is saying here, is picking an extreme and then becoming impersonal to a person, to other people, through that extreme viewpoint.
Yes, for sure. I think social connection is important in all aspects of life. Why wouldn't it be important in religious circles, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Christ himself did not stand on a corner and scream obscenities at people from from his own words, which he certainly could have better than anybody. He didn't take that approach. So why would we? I don't know where people get that from. It's I understand getting angry about things or wanting to take someone and to maybe shake some sense into them or something, but that never worked on me. So I wouldn't expect it to work on somebody else.
No, no. I mean, you think about Jesus's journey, and then even Paul and Peter and the apostles afterwards. Jesus was criticized big time for one major thing, was having dinner and sitting down and having dinner with the sinners.
Sure.
Yeah, and he wasn't, he could have just said, like you said, stand in the corner and call them out. And he has had, lessons where he called out the prophet.
Sure.
Funny thing is he called out the righteous for their hypocrisy.
He, he called out the people that were doing the things we're just talking about. Yeah.
But the sinners, the people who were godless, he went and had dinner with them. He went
Right.
and built relationships with them. That's how he drew Matthew and Mark and John to his side. He connected with them at a relationship level. He didn't say, "Oh, you're a sinner. You need to follow me." He built that relationship. I'm sure the way the Gospels presented it was come with me, or I mean, even at their level, it's simplified down. But he went out fishing with them. You know, he said, let's go fishing, and then let's catch fish on this side, and then we'll catch fish on the other side of the boat, and then that story, and while it's only a few sentences in the story, I imagine that was probably maybe an hour or two of time of sitting around and starting to build a connection with us with Peter in his boat, and then explaining, so it's the relationship that he built. So we should we have to, if we're going to be Christians, which means Christ-like, we ought to be doing the same.
Absolutely.
So
It's amazing what demeanor you see in people when you just approach them normally, like you would want to be treated.
yeah,
And you hardly have to say much about God. You say, hey, pray for. I met a guy the other day in the gas station. Pray for my friend. He said, "Oh, I'd love to." I said, "I'll keep you in prayer." Isn't God? And then he yelled across to me, we all need something. And I yelled back. I said, "Yeah, well, God knows. He has a way of taking care of us, doesn't it?" I mean, it's a random stranger. I think we live in the Bible Belt and stuff. I think generally people understand there's a God, and there's no sense in trying to be forceful with them. Just show them some compassion and let them know you're a human being and you have needs just like they have, and they tend to open up to you.
yeah. Well, I think that was a good discussion tonight, Aaron. We'll wrap this up. So we'll, as you said before we started this broadcast, we'd already tackled chapter 8 and 9. So we're going to skip over them. Our next video will be jumping into chapter 10. So,
All right.
all right. Well, good talking to you again, Aaron. And let me close out this broadcast, and we'll pick up next time.
All right.